So, hello everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. Before beginning the presentation, let me first taking 2 minutes to make some updates. So we are still accepting paper submission for presentation in this webinar. And you can go in our website to connect and to send your paper. We have also mandatory program that you can submit, and you will be allocated to a supervisor for in-depth discussion and feedbacks. For this presentation, we will have two presentations. The first one is for Marina Hesham from Cairo University and University Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne, who will be present a paper on harassment and female labor force participation, micro-level evidence from Egypt. And a second presentation, House of Peace, Youth Labor Participation in Care Time Reallocation following the 2014 ceasefire in Colombia, presented by Dario Maldonado Carizosa from the University de Los Andes. After we have three discussants, after each presentation, we have three discussants. The discussants are Zahra Siddique from University of Bristol, Boltz, University of Strasbourg, and Ali Fakih, Lebanese American University. So I think that we can start. Marina, you can share your presentation. We have 15 to 20 minutes of presentation. Marina, can you share your slides?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, you can up for the beginning. Yes. Okay, so you have the words for beginning. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So thank you all for the opportunity and for this very insightful initiative of DevConnect. The paper I'm going to present for you today is a co-authored paper with Professors Ariel Dupont-Kefer, Rosh Ramadan, and Hanan Nazir from Cairo University and University of Paris and Panthéon-Sorbonne. And it's actually a part of my PhD thesis. So all of your comments and propositions are very, very welcome. The paper I'm presenting is about the harassment and female labor force participation in Egypt. And why specifically this topic? Because as we all know that harassment and sexual harassment specifically is a very common form of violence against women in public spaces. It has very negative consequences on women, on their physical health, mental health, as well as their productivity. And it leads to a very high fear of being targeted in public spaces, leading women to withdraw from several of these spaces as well as the labor market. And this impact is very pronounced in the societies where this issue of sexual harassment is considered as a taboo. And despite the fact that this phenomenon is very widespread in Egypt, till now we don't have really enough research and data about this issue. On the other hand, on the labor market side in Egypt, till 2023, and I think till now, we have one of the lowest FLFP rates around the world. It was actually around from 18 to 19%, which is lower than the global average of 50% and lower than the MENA region average of 20%. And despite this very low rate of FLFP, the extensive literature on FLFP in Egypt didn't take into account the community factors like this issue of violence, and specifically the violence in public spaces. It was more focused on the socio-demographic factors on the supply side and the employer's discrimination on the demand side. And so we can see that there is a persistent gap in the Egyptian literature, and this is specifically why I'm focusing on this topic. If you go back a little bit into the literature, we can retrieve 4 key insights. First of all, we have a theoretical gap. All the traditional labor market theories overlook this issue of violence and violence in public spaces specifically. However, on the empirical evidence side, we can see that research from developed countries such as the US or even other developing countries like India and African countries show that both the actual experience of harassment or the violence and even just the perceived risk, both of them lead to significant and negative impacts on women's decision to withdraw from the labor force. And also we can see that in the literature, it can be linked to the literature on the transportation and mobility. So the question of violence in public spaces is very linked to the issue of lack of security in transportation, which is considered as a major structural barrier to women's decision to participate into the labor force. For the Egyptian context, we had several legal reforms regarding the issue of sexual harassment in 2018. However, till now, it's still very underreported and under-researched, and we don't have really a comprehensive data set in order to track how these legal reforms were able or they were not able to solve a bit of this issue of sexual harassment. So the contribution of this paper, to our knowledge, of course, it's one of the first studies to examine the effects or the empirical effects of the sexual harassment on FLFP in Egypt using nationally representative dataset. It adds to the literature on FLFP, and it relates with the research question to the transportation literature. For the data of this paper, we are using two main data sources. First of all, the Egyptian Economic Cost of Gender-Based Violence Survey. It was collected in 2015, and it's actually the only data set we have in Egypt that have questions or observations about different types of violence against women, including the violence in public spaces. And the second data source is the Egyptian Labor Market Panel Survey, the WAVE of 2018, which is a nationally representative data set also, but it captures more the outcomes related to the labor market. And so we done a combined strategy, or we merge both data sets, as I'm going to explain briefly in the methodology section. To give you an overview of the situation in Egypt, in 2015, of course, figure number 1, it shows the harassment rates. According to the response rates or the women responses in 2015, we have around 12% of women reporting that they have been victims of at least one form of harassment. So either harassment in public transportation or harassment generally on the streets, compared to 6% who reported that it was only in public transportation and 9% reporting that it was only on the street. And for figure 2, I'm showing you the FLFP status for women aged between 15 and 64 years old. According to the ELMPS of 2018, 19% were employed compared to 5% unemployed and 76% out of the labor market, which is consistent with the international data sets of the World Bank and the ILO. Now moving to the methodology section. So the baseline or the identification strategy can be presented as follows. Of course, our dependent variable is the FLFP, measured by a dummy or a binary variable according to the ILO definition. So a woman is considered active on the labor market if she's employed or she's currently, she has been willing and searching for a job, and 0 otherwise. And then we have the harassment, which is the variable of interest, measuring sexual harassment. We have 3 specifications: either harassment on the street, harassment in public transportation, and 1 for both of them. And then we have X, which is a vector of control variables, including the individual and the household control. So classically, since the dependent variable is binary, so we can use the discrete choice models, the linear probability models, logit probit. However, the literature on the violence against women and FLFP shows that we have potentially the problem of endogeneity. There are several causes behind this endogeneity, But the key one is the reverse causality as per the exposure theory, which means that not only the harassment will have an effect on women's decision to participate into the labor force, but being active on the labor force will make women more vulnerable, or they can be more exposed to different episodes of harassment. So we have this issue of reverse causality. And from here comes the idea of merging two different data sets to do a temporal separation of the data. And then we are trying to disentangle this issue because the 2018 FLFP rate, or the FLFP decision of 2018, couldn't have possibly had an effect on the harassment rates of 2015. So by merging the two data sets, we have this identification strategy by constructing an area level harassment rate depending on S, which is the area of residence, with, whether the household is in an urban or a rural area, and J, which is the governorate in Egypt, which is basically the geographical unit in Egypt. And so the identification relies on the cross area variation in the harassment rate. So now, after explaining briefly the methodology, I can go with a little bit an overview of the findings we have. So first of all, with the baseline findings, according to the three models, LPM, Logit, and Probit, we can see that harassment has a significant and a negative effect on women's decision to participate into the labor force. So from the beginning, we can see that harassment can be considered as a barrier for women's decision to actively participate in the Egyptian labor market. Now, and I'm sorry, before going a little bit deeper, all the control variables that we have included in the model go in line with the previous literature on the FLFP. So basically, age has nonlinear relationship with the FLFP. Education has a positive impact with greater effect among the women with highest education levels. For the marital status, being married or widowed is associated with lower likelihood of participation. For the household characteristics, rural residence is associated with higher probability of FLFP, according to the added worker effect, and for and living in higher or wealthier household leads to a lower probability of FLFP according to the income effect. Finally, we included also the parental background to capture the intergenerational transmission a little bit between the parents and the woman. And when the woman has a mother who has not been working or she was not active on the labor market, this leads to lower probability of FLFP, and it goes the other side when the father was not working. So having a father who was not working leads to a higher probability of FLFP. Now, focusing on the effect of harassment and going a little bit deeper, first of all, we had done a division of the harassment according to the location of the episode, whether it was on the street or in the public transportation, and we can see that all the effects are negative and significant. However, for the transportation, we can observe that the magnitude is higher. So probably the the harassment that occurs on in public transportation has a more traumatic effect on women compared to the harassment on the streets. And this is basically because, for instance, for most of the jobs in Egypt, women would need to commute a little bit of long distances. So by all means, they would need to have a transportation. So when we talk about public transportation, such as buses or microbuses and all of this, if all these transportations are not considered as secured by women, many of them would be very reluctant to participate into the labor force. And then we have started to do a heterogeneity analysis in order to see which are the subpopulations of women who will be more affected by this issue of harassment. And the key result that will continue with us till the end of the paper is this distinction by the marital status. So we can see here a clear distinction between the married and the unmarried sample. While both have negative effects, only for the married sample it's significant, which means that this can be more related to the household dynamics and the power balance between the wife and the husband, rather than just the trauma effect of the harassment that could have on the woman. And this we are going to see it later with the mediation channels analysis. When we add an extra layer by doing a heterogeneity analysis by the marital status and the age cohort, this key result persists. So by all means, we have that only the married sample will be affected. And when we focus by age, we can see that women aged between 25 and 44 years old are the ones who are affected. So those women who are in the prime age of joining the labor market, basically at 25 years old, they have just finished, or 2 years after finishing the university studies in Egypt, and they are able to join the labor market. However, this age is also the prime age in which they are married and they are composing families. So we can see that this interlinkage between different factors can make this specific age cohort more vulnerable to the harassment issues compared to the younger or the older ones. And when we do also this analysis by the marital status and the area of residence, we can see that married women in the urban areas are the ones who are affected by the harassment and not in the rural areas. And this can be explained also by the difference in the setting between urban and rural areas in Egypt. In Egypt, rural areas are more close-knit communities in which when women have a job, they don't really commute for very long distances. And we have this extra layer of informal protection as people know each other. Compared to the urban areas, women have to commute for longer distances. The community don't really know each other, so probably the woman will be more threatened by this issue of harassment in the urban areas compared to the rural ones. Finally, to close this parenthesis on the issue of between married or unmarried, we have been thinking that the effect of harassment on the married woman, it should be differentiated, whether it's really because of the household dynamics or the power balance between the husband and the wife, or whether it's because of the other channels that have been discussed in the literature of the effects of harassment on the FLFP. So we have constructed 3 different variables capturing 3 different mediating channels, either the emotional distress or the low self-efficacy, and finally the husband controlling behavior. And as you can see from the table, then when we added in different specifications the three different variables, each in a different specification, the overall effect of harassment didn't really change. It's always significant and negative. However, we can see that for some of them, they have also a negative effect. So the low self-efficacy has a negative and significant impact on the FLFP, as well as the husband controlling behavior. So we can think a little bit that they may mediate a part of the effect. But when we do the interaction, the only interaction that was significant and negative was between the harassment and the husband controlling behavior, which is kind of captured this channel that we have been talking about, that maybe for the married sample specifically, the harassment would have a negative and a significant impact, not only because of the trauma, not only because of the emotional distress and all of the negative effects of harassment on women, but because of the intervention of the husband who may refuse that his wife will work if he perceives that the working environment is not safe enough for her. Finally, we have done a very quick robustness check, not by relying on both data sets as we have done, but by only relying on only one data set, which is the initial one, including variables on the violence against women. And we have done a reduced form by having the harassment rate at the governorate level. And again, the effect is significant and negative. So finally, to conclude, as per the findings of the paper, sexual harassment can be considered as a significant barrier to women's economic participation in Egypt, specifically for married women, urban women, and those aged between 25 and 44 years old. And we can see that the different mediating channels, that one of the most important of them is this power dynamics between the husband and the wife. And so we can see that the persistence of the low FLFP rates in Egypt cannot be explained solely by the education demographics or the employer side discrimination, but we have the unsafe public spaces and mobility constraints that are also key structural determinants. And so to address this very low rate of FLFP in Egypt, we know we need a more holistic approach, taking into account safer transportation, enforcement of anti-harassment laws, private sector engagement, and of course, the active involvement of men in shifting norms. Finally, for the study limitations, of course, we have several ones. So first of all, the issue that we are relying on cross-sectional violence data. So basically, we cannot capture any evolution in time, neither for the different rates of violence, neither for the changes and the evolution of the labor market in Egypt, which has been dramatic after 2015. Third, we have the issue of the potential underreporting of harassment. So basically, in the data set, it says around 12%, but to a great extent, this is not the correct rate. Maybe we are having a very high rate, but we don't know about it. So this highlights really the need for improved future data. We need more waves to have or to capture this evolution in the harassment rates in Egypt or the rates of any other type of violence, and to be able to link it with the evolution in the labor market. And this is why really the institutional context matters. We need to have better reporting mechanisms and social support in order to improve both the data quality and the policy relevance of these issues related to the labor market and violence against women. And thank you.
Thank you, Marina, for your presentation. And thank you for respecting the time. I recall that participants can ask questions in the chat, or you can raise your hands after the discussion. You will ask your question. Now we can begin the discussion with the first one is Zahra. Zahra, you can begin.
Thank you. Thanks, Marina, for the presentation. I enjoyed reading the paper. I think it's on a very important topic, and actually it's the first one, as you also mentioned at the start of your presentation, in the kind of Middle East and North Africa region, where I haven't seen this particular kind of, this link between harassment and women's decisions to work outside of the home. So most of the papers that I've seen are based in the South Asia context, where actually, in general, you find female labor force participation rates to be around like 30% compared to about 20% in the Middle East and North Africa, which is less. So, obviously important to understand what is kind of behind this low female labor force participation. So I had a whole bunch of kind of comments / questions about the different data sets. So I think, there is, so a lot of this is kind of making it more clear for the reader, some of the issues. So for instance, one of the things that you mentioned is underreporting, which is very important in kind of the literature on violence against women. So obviously, one of the big things is that often women are not very comfortable reporting incidents of harassment or violence that can happen. So I think it will be really useful in the paper if you had kind of more information about what exactly were the questions that were asked about harassment in the neighborhoods and what steps were taken by the people who did the survey to ensure that women were giving honest responses. So for instance, in the demographic and health surveys, which are used a lot for intimate partner violence, there's a particular protocols that they follow about, these questions are asked in a certain way, they're very specific and so on. So I think that's kind of just to highlight the fact that there were certain kind of ways that these questions, that the surveys were done or the questions were asked, which kind of gives us more confidence that they're capturing what they're meant to capture, which is the level of harassment faced by women in particular parts of the country. So I think that would be very useful. Then you use the ELMPS, which is a panel data set, is my understanding, for the labor market. And then, it kind of led me to be thinking about why you were not using more waves of this particular panel, because it would still be interesting, even if you have information just about cross-section, about different areas of, what the level of harassment is in different parts of the country, about, how that has, because you could potentially use more waves before and after, like, over time variation. So I think that might be potentially something quite nice to exploit a bit more. Then in the regression specifications that you have, equation 1 and equation 2, the outcome variable, I think, is it like just whether or not women are working in general, or whether it's more related to women working outside the home, which might be something which is more closely connected with harassment in the community that women face. For instance, it could be that in rural parts of the country, a lot of women work as unpaid laborers on their own kind of farms or something. So maybe they're not really commuting a lot or for work and so on. So I think this would be good to have more information on as well. I mean, you want to ideally capture women working outside the home when one is looking at, level of harassment in transport and streets. So I think that would be the best way to kind of capture those impacts. For these regressions, I guess you could add time and local area fixed effects as well, which would allow you to rule out some potential confounding variables, because one can imagine that labor force participation does vary across different parts of the country and over time as well. I don't know, there might be some time variation there, particularly in rural labor markets. And then at the geographical level, you merge the different data sets. But again, I mean, it is at the governorate level, I believe. So I think more information about how many governorates are there in Egypt, and whether it's possible to use kind of a more disaggregate measure of neighborhoods would be quite nice. For instance, this paper by Tanika Chakraborty in India is using the India Human Development Survey, which also asks individuals about what is the amount of harassment in the community. But I think they use, the district level. So I think this is kind of quite important, because when women are commuting for work, what is the distances over which they're traveling, and what is the so I guess it's harassment at a very local level that one would ideally like to have information on. So I'm just wondering if that is possible to use. Then kind of this is more specific, but in the first table that you have with descriptive statistics, I think it would be nice to have a descriptive statistic on harassment measures also across the different groups. So you had these in the slides, but I didn't see something similar in the paper, sorry. So that would, I think, be also useful information to have. For the table of results, you use the linear probability model and also the logit and probit. And I was wondering if you're reporting in the tables just the coefficients on the logit and probit or the marginal effects. So I think you should report marginal effects, because then that allows a direct comparison with the linear probability model coefficients. Then another thing that I was kind of wondering was whether the survey that was asked about harassment, whether it had any questions about workplace harassment, because that would also be very interesting to study because there's practically no data sets looking at developing countries which have information on workplace harassment. So a lot of the papers on that are actually just using data from developed countries. So I think if you have that information there, that would also be potentially very useful to exploit. Yeah, so I think those are all the main comments that I had. Apart from that, I was just thinking whether they're administrative data. I know for India, for instance, the Home Office makes available the number of crimes which are committed against women. They report them by area. So if there's something like that for Egypt, I think that would be very useful also to look at. Then one of the things that I did in my work on India was I used media reporting. So those media reporting is also a useful kind of source of information that one could exploit about whether there are kind of incidents of violence against women that are reported in media outlets, because that can impact the perception of women about the amount of harassment they might face or their chances of becoming a victim of violence. So I think that would also be potentially useful to incorporate, maybe with the panel on labor market outcomes. I think using the panel would be really nice because again, there's not a lot of good quality panels, so it allows you to look at the overtime. But I think this is something that you've thought about. It was there in your slides as well. But yeah, overall, I think it's addressing a very important question in a setting in which it hasn't been investigated. So it's really very interesting.
Thank you, Zahra, for your comments. We can move on the second one. So we have to be quick because the time is almost end. So Marie Boss, you can begin.
Yes. I will be short, so I leave time also to Ali that I think should also give some comments. So thanks a lot, Marina, for the very nice and clear presentation, and I really enjoyed to read your paper. I had obviously also a few comments. I think I really like also the first part that discussed all the theory documented in the literature and the evidence that was already there and the lack of evidence for the MENA region and especially for Egypt. So I think the topic is super relevant and highly important as well. So maybe a few comments. I think I totally agree with what Zahra was mentioning, and I think it would help a lot if you give more information in terms of descriptive statistics, and especially I was looking for example, a map where you would show the variation in the treatment exposure. So how does all this governorate, like rural and urban region, vary in terms of intensity of harassment? Because we don't have a lot of information about this intensity in harassment, and I think this is super important because it's key in your estimation and would help a lot it would help a lot. I was also wondering if for the estimation part, if obviously, I like the fact that you use these two waves and that you are exploiting the past wave and aggregating it at a larger scale to avoid like reverse causality. Obviously, part of the story is also through selection on unobservable. So I was wondering if you could do some bounding exercises like Osterbound to try to see how sensitive your results are to potential omitted variable bias. I think it would be nice. Maybe you thought, because I know that in another paper you did it already, so how could maybe also try to do better matching on observable characteristic of this governorates to try to help identification as well, because the fear here is that some governorates that are more exposed to harassment are also differing in other aspects that is driving the results. And so if you really want to push the idea that what the variation that you are really measuring when you are comparing this woman is exposure to harassment. It makes really sense. I mean, as your result and the fact that you have all these two groups, it's really compelling. But I think it would strengthen your analysis if you could maybe work a little bit better on that. So fixed effect may be better, but then you need sufficient like variation within the governorate. So I don't know if you have sufficient maybe disaggregated information or do it at a local, a more granular level. I was wondering. And going away from identification, I was wondering whether you would have the opportunity to also conduct like qualitative interviews. So because with all the problem of underreporting and the subject to be so sensitive, I think like having also interviews that like would document like the channel you try to pin down could be really interesting to have both like this different methodology, and I think it would be nice as well. So I don't know if you were considering this. I have other comments, but we can discuss it another moment. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you to be short. And we can move to Ali. Have you something to say?
Yes, hello everyone.
Rapidly.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I'll try to be brief as much as possible. Yeah. Indeed. So thank you for your presentation. It's an excellent work. And as you know, this paper really contributes to understanding the regional or MENA paradox about low female labor force participation despite education achievement of girls and female. So the paper, to me, it makes really a few or three, if you want to summarize, three contributions. So it highlights sexual harassment as a structural barrier to female labor force participation. And we have also papers in this strand of literature review. Even though we have enough evidence, but it's an issue I consider it important and was neglected in labor economic studies on the region. Second, it used really nationally representative data and combined surveys on gender-based violence, which is needed for labor policy design and for policymakers. And in addition, it provides interesting heterogeneity and mediation results, especially after controlling for behavior and so on. So this is overall what's the paper about and the contribution. So let me briefly summarize the main points that I saw in the paper and may raise some concerns. So let me start with some modeling side and some econometrics application. So we have under the umbrella of identification or causality, identification and causal effect. So the paper really addresses reverse causality by using harassment rates from 2015, if I remember in the paper, and labor outcome from 2018, and by aggregating harassment at the area level. So this may raise some concerns indeed. So area level harassment may still capture unobservable local characteristics, such as norms, conservative norms, if you want, some hidden labor market conditions to access labor market, to access female to labor market, infrastructure quality, among others. So these factors may independently affect female labor force participation. So the model may fail to capture these under unobservable local characteristics, if you want. So one can ask, under this umbrella of identification and causality, how confident can we be about the results reflecting harassment rather than broader local gender norms and or economic conditions? All right. So one possible solution could be possible extension under the umbrella of IV strategy or quasi-experimental variation. If we have policy change or, as an example, policy change or transport reform. So this is one in terms main comment. Second, if you allow me, measurement of harassment. So the paper focuses on reported sexual harassment. However, in existing studies, when going quickly through a scan of literature review, so they suggest a sort of different measure, or if you want, a strong under-reporting and social bias, especially in conservative context. So in this regard here, would measurement error bias result in some downward empirical findings? So this is a question one can ask here. I don't know what could be an alternative if we may have some robustness check. Three, very quickly.
Okay.
Sorry?
Just so can you conclude? We have just another presentation.
Okay.
You can come back. You can come back at the end.
I'll send
we'll have
the summary if you want for after the presentation to the author. So also, I think it's important to highlight the possible extension and the future work. So here I have some suggestions. I can send you like dynamic effects on human capital investment, or if you want to have a long-term effects of on wage or occupational choice. So overall, really, I appreciate the paper. It's an important and well-executed paper that brings violence and safety concerns into labor economics, especially with this new evidence, and it opens the discussion and the promising discussion and avenues for both research and the policy makers on women's labor force participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. And maybe you can send the comments after by email first. So we can move in the second presentation, and Dario, you can share your.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you.
You can share your slide.
Sure. So thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here in this very nice and important network and to share with you my research. So what I'm speaking about is this research I have with a colleague from Universidad Rosario. You're now seeing the presentation? Sorry. Yeah, good. Thank you, Marina.
Yes, it's good. Yes, you can.
So I'm sharing this presentation done with colleagues from Universidad Rosario and the World Bank. I'm teacher at Universidad de los Andes in Bogota, Colombia, in the School of Government. So the title is Hours of Peace, Time Allocation After the 2014 Ceasefire in Colombia. So our motivation, what we want to do, and maybe some of you know what's been going on with Colombia. In 2014, there was a big negotiation with the FARC-EP, which is one of our main violent groups, revolutionary violent groups, that had been active for around a little bit less than 60 years in that moment. And that was like a pivotal decline in armed violence in Colombia that had been affecting us for decades. That's what this is not the only group. We have been our only insurgent group but it was one of the main groups which was active all around the country by that time. So what we wanted to, the question we made to us and what we wanted to address was whether we could see if some effects and results of this ceasefire, which was motivated by the need of having peace in the country and making changes that allow welfare improvement for all our population and particularly youth. So what we wanted what our question was whether we could see some of these improvements in the welfare of youth. And we went then to look at how time allocation of youth had changed around the ceasefire. Our motivation then was to look at our intuition and our idea is that if the changing the conditions in the country and the reduction in the armed violence could change the way youth allocate their time, allowing them more productive forms of using their time. In view of the major structural shock which was implied by the ceasefire. So what we did was to examine domains like education, labor market, household tax, caregiving, and leisure and sleep by youth defined in the 1428 age window, which is the standard definition for youth in many of our, well, in the international main definition, and it's also very similar to the Colombian one. Our conflict was very important and affected a lot of people. So more than 9 million victims, youth disproportionately affected, high rates of displacement, high rates of forced recruitment, reduced schooling outcomes. So these are many things we already know from many other previous research, particularly, for example, we have recent contributions related to schooling outcomes, and what we expected was to see that reducing insecurity constraints would enable other uses of time for youth. The data we use is what we call here in Colombia the ENUT, which is mainly a national representative time use microdata. So this ENUT survey follows international exercises about how time is allocated and international methodologies for time accounting. We have 3 waves of this data, 2012-13, 2016-17, and 2020-21. So the peace agreement is just between the first and the second wave of the ENUT we have. So this seemed like a very good opportunity to see whether the cohorts before and after the youth cohorts before and after the peace agreement were behaving differently in terms of and measure through the way their time is used. We also used other standard and well-known data sources here in Colombia. One of them is the SEDA conflict event data that gives municipal level violent attacks by the FARC group. And data from the SEDE, which is the economics research center here at my university that has a municipal panel. We also used the 2018 census and satellite night data to measure economic activity. At the end, we have a sample of more than 41,000 youth across 2,012 municipalities. This is, in terms of municipalities, this is like between 1/5 and 1/6 of the municipalities in Colombia. So Colombia has 1,100 municipalities, so we have something between 1/5 and 1/6 of all municipalities. Our empirical strategy seems we have 3 waves. We can use a difference in difference strategy, in which we use and the strategy, the specification is there. We have in our specification we have fixed effects for time, fixed effects for municipalities. We have the indicator of the exposure of the municipality to the conflict by FARC, that FARC-M, which is indexed by M, which is the municipality. We have, as usual, indifference and difference. We have an observation before or after the treatment, which was basically being one of those municipalities which were more affected by the violence by FARC. a bunch of controls, and the usual statistical error. We are measuring these for a bunch of outcomes. So since we have time, we have to take care of either participation or the time spent in different activities. So we measure our specifications are measured for the extensive margin, the participation, or the intensive margin, the time spent. We are measuring these for different types of outcomes, so labor market, education, care of others, household tasks, and sleeping. There we have I'm putting there the controls we have: municipal poverty, population, pretense via. This is really a little bit less precise than I would like. So we are also making a propensity score matching estimates. Since we have some of our outcomes may be censored because we don't have results either 0 or less than 0. We're also taking care of, in some cases, we are also using TOBIT specifications, and this is particularly the case for sleep, since everybody sleeps almost every day, and leisure, since in our data nobody has a 0 leisure in their time use. We have a lot of outcomes, so we also take into account we also make multiple hypothesis correction using the Romanov-Wolf step and the Siddique corrections. And also for robustness, we do propensity score matching estimations. So let me go directly to some of our results. So first, this is a graph that has some of the that shows how youth use their time in Colombia. So we have our age windows from 14 to 28 years. We have in the y-axis time spent, number of days by youth in the different activities we have. Some important things you see is that as people age, the allocation of time changes, and it goes from education is reduced, more labor market, more time spent in the labor market, more household activities spent by individuals, more care of individuals, and a little bit less leisure and self-care. Also, sleep changes, and there is more sleep less sleep, as individual age. This paper, we take a lot of care in looking at gender gaps. So the following graph is how the gender gaps in time use. And what we see is that things like participation in the labor market is the gender gap. The female-male gender gap in labor market, in time allocated to the labor market, increases with age. So as people age, more males dedicate more time to the labor market than women. And we also see an important increase in the gender gap in care of individuals. So more women spending more time taking care of others than male. This will be very important for what we do afterwards. We are gonna do not only looking at the effect of the peace ceasefire agreement on the average time spent in these different activities, but also in how the gender gaps change in these activities. We also take care of other gaps, such as socioeconomic gaps and age gap, but I won't speak too much about them today because time is not enough to cover all the results we have. So our main results. First, we find non-statistically significant negative effect in both margins in education. So we cannot argue that the peace agreement is allowing youth to spend more time in education. In the labor market, we find a mildly statistically significant positive effect on the extensive margin only. So slightly more participation in the labor market because of the peace agreement. We don't find statistically significant effects in the either in the extensive nor in the intensive margin in household activities, but we do find statistically significant positive effect in both margins for caregiving. No effect for leisure and self-care, and a statistically significant positive effect in that should be negative. Sorry, in for sleep in the intensive margin. So this is how our results look. We have, as I already said, since we have so much specifications which we have to make and so much outcomes, we have long tables there. I'm not showing all the details. I just want to show how this looks in our paper, and just for transparency to show that we have all the results here. So for any results, we have extensive and intensive margin. For the extensive margin, we have an OLS. For the intensive margin, we do either TOBIT or OLS. Whether in each case we are using what we need, with all the corrections in square brackets or in curly brackets, depending on, these are the multiple hypothesis corrections which are also there. We use year fixed effects, municipality fixed effects, and our controls. And we have a little bit more than 41,000 observations. So this will be the results for education, in which we see that there are no effects for education, either at the extensive or the intensive margin in our results. So I have these. So here will be the labor market results, and this is what I was saying, that we have these mild statistical effect results. This is mild because we have statistical significance is only at the 10% level, and we are only seeing it not right after the peace agreement in 2016, but we are seeing the result after 2020. So it seems that it looks as if it took some time before youth were able to spend more time in participate more intensively participate more in the labor market. These will be the results for the household activities where we don't have any statistical effect. These will be the effect of care of individuals. So this is I think the most important result we have, in which we have more individuals either participated in taking care of others, and also more time spent in the intensive margin in taking care of others. We have here the results for leisure and self-care with no statistically significant effects, and the effect in the reduction in sleep. So in my previous slide, I said that the effect was positive, but it really is written that I wrote that it's positive, but we have this negative effect. So less time spent in sleeping by youth. So I won't show all the tables for all the heterogeneous effects. I will just summarize our effects. So for the labor market, we have, when we go, so I already said that we do have a labor market, an increase in labor market participation, but when we go and see the heterogeneous effect, what we see is that this effect is concentrated in women. So no effect, no participation effect, no effect in labor market participation for men, but only for women, with no significant substitution away from leisure or education at the mean. In terms of heterogeneous effect for age, we have the sharpest labor market increase is for ages between 20 and 23. We do see a increase in caregiving in ages 14, 20, 19. So the youngest of the young people are spending more time in caregiving. And for the older ones, we see this effect in sleep and household tasks. We are seeing it in old individuals. Okay, and then so this will be like our main the main effects we're seeing and the way we try to rationalize what we're seeing. So what we see in our results is that the peace agreement allowed women to participate more in the labor market. At the same time, it forced women to spend more time in caregiving. And for men, it also allowed more caregiving and also slightly some more domestic work. So what we're seeing is with this research is that the peace agreement in some sense allowed to more participation for some part of for women with some reallocation in other activities towards men. And these are allocation in which mean more caregiving and more domestic work for men. So after this, what we will go and try to do is to try to explain the mechanisms behind our results. So we have two main mechanisms in which we're considering. The first one is whether there is an effect of migration and demography. The peace agreement, we know that the peace agreement changed migration and demography because it in two senses. It allowed people to return to their municipalities. There was lots of displacement before the peace because of violence. So with the peace agreement, many people were able to arrive to their home municipalities, and it also changed household composition because of the same reason. So after the peace agreement, households were also different because people were returning. So what we try to see is whether some of these effects are explaining what we see, and what we seem to see here is that part of the
Dario,
yes?
Excuse me, we have just 10 minutes left.
Yeah,
finish.
sure. I will take less than 10. So
okay,
I'm
you can
finished.
conclude.
Thank you, Omer. So what we're seeing is that we have that these household composition changes implied more care needs of families, and these may be behind the fact that more people is taking care of either men or women. Our second proposition is second mechanism is economic activities. The way we use the way we measure economic activities is through satellite nightlights, which is a proxy for economic growth. What we think is that
Dario,
yes?
excuse me again. I think that we have to finish the presentation. You just to show the last. I think that
yeah, so yes. I will show you just my last graph, and then I will conclude. So this is my conclusion. Sorry, Omar, I said you were saying I had more time, so but I'm finishing. Don't worry. So this will be what we do to see whether there was an economic shock that may explain the increase in labor market supply by women particularly, and the additional is to see whether there was an increase in economic activities in municipalities mainly affected by the ceasefire. And what our data show is that in effect we are seeing an effect of an increase in more economic activities in these municipalities that can also be explaining this labor market effect through an economic shock. So this will be my conclusions. We see that the ceasefire triggered a reallocation in time, more labor and caregiving, and less sleep, but with a gender pattern towards more equal domestic burden sharing, more labor market effects, and labor market effects concentrated on women. With some also socioeconomic effects, because we are seeing that most of these gains are concentrated among more advantaged households. Okay, so this is about all. Omar, thank you very much.
Thank you, and excuse us for this because the time is very
I understand.
Small. So we have just to take I think 2 questions from Discussants, because we have to take time for the responses. So Marie, just I think just 2 questions maybe, and Ali also 2 questions. Okay.
Two. Okay, thanks a lot, Omar. Thanks a lot, Dario, for this very interesting paper. I really enjoyed reading it as well, and bring back a lot of memory as well. So I was so two questions. So I was wondering whether you could exploit more data in terms of heterogeneity, in terms of household dynamics, also household structure. So because for me, this result about increasing informal care is super puzzling for this generation. So now, given how you framed the result, I was wondering whether I should make a joke and asking whether we could also think that the result is that these youths are bringing their younger siblings into partying at night, and that's why you see all this effect, because they are sleeping less, doing more care, and this is also correlated with more night lights. Everything makes sense with this story. No, but so I think digging into the marital status and the presence of children as a explanation would be nice. Whether look at I think also motivate better why you focus on youth. So you frame it, but somehow we really wonder why the conflict should affect only youth. So why don't you show the result for all people for which you have time use data? And why just this youth population? And also, but that's something that goes back to the PREM paper, and that because you are using the same identification strategy in terms of treatment definition. But I was always wondering, so why focusing only on attacks made by FARC and not using the areas of the zone of influence of the FARC? Because FARC were not attacking where they were present. So, and it's not because they were present without attacking that they were not control and a lot of influence and that's maybe even trauma and victims. So I was wondering how much even your control group could be also treated. Okay, so that would downward bias your result, but also maybe there were, and since you cannot really check it, they could be on different also trends. So I think more on this, and I think I have to stop, right? But maybe also look at seemingly unrelated equations for your share of time use, because I think it would be nice as well to correct for the fact that these different equation outcomes are correlated. That's very interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marie, for this. Ali, you can take 2 questions. Or
be short as much as possible. So to go straight to the point, to main concerns and main questions, if you want, make it 2 to 3, basically. So please correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of identification and parallel trends, the paper cannot test parallel trends because there is only one treatment period, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, so in this case, the propensity score matching improves the balance between the groups, but doesn't solve time varying confounder.
Yeah.
So can we do something about it? For example, because the results may be sensitive to differential pre-trend in conflict intensity or economic growth. So could the authors, or could you provide some test, alternative control groups, different approach? So this is one. Second, very briefly, in terms of TOBIT with two-way fixed effect and the clustering. So basically, we use in the paper TOBIT U to many zeros, right? So TOBIT assumes normality, heteroscedastic error term, and censoring at 0, basically. But are zeros truly censoring, or they are corner solutions? So maybe clarifications or some additional elaboration about it, because I got confused regarding the use of a topic or the justification. Or it could be, would a two-part or would a hurdle model, for instance, participation probability plus our conditional on positive be more attractive and less assumption demanded or heavy in terms of assumptions? The others related to interpretation, I can send you basically in terms of income effects and labor effect. So why does, for instance, leisure not decline if work will increase? So this is a question I noticed here, because the paper suggests, among others, economic productivity shock, household recomposition, and migration changes. But what about income effects and labor market, or sorry, labor demand effects in terms of leisure and so on? So I'll send you my comments for the two papers if you want. Yeah, I'll stop here. So is it good?
Thank you, Ali, for your understanding, and we thank you for the time you take to discuss the papers. And now we have just to we give its present 3 minutes for its presenters to respond to the question before moving to the questions. So Marina, we can begin by Marina. Marina, you have just three minutes to respond.
Okay, thank you. Where to begin? Okay, so thank you for all the comments. I can wrap up just on a few comments that will be very difficult to do. So basically, all of the comments are very welcome, and most of them I will consider in the paper. However, for some of them, for example, for the workplace harassment, I don't really have data on this issue, so I cannot include it on the paper. Also, for the media reporting or having administrative data, as Dr. Zahra has also mentioned, this issue is also present in Egypt. We don't have this type of data on media reporting or good administrative data that we can use for this issue of violence. Also for the proposition of Dr. Marie Boltz, and we will discuss more obviously, but for the proposition of the qualitative interviews, since the topic is very, very sensitive in Egypt, in most of the cases, this will be very difficult, very, very difficult to do. With the security clearances and all of this, it will be really difficult to do and to obtain. Last thing, the proposition by Dr. Ali Fakih on the issue of underreporting and the measurement error, and to see whether we can use other IVs and all of this. Actually, in an earlier version of the paper, we tried to do this IV or the 2SLS method, but we have decided that the quality of the IV wasn't so good. So it was better to try to do a merge between different data sets instead of relying on an IV without an external validity. And for the measurement error, of course, we know that this exists, so we can somehow consider that these results may be regarded as lower bounds. So this is the minimum effect we can detect. Maybe it's greater, but we cannot detect it. But other from that, all the comments, thank you so much for all the comments, and I will integrate many, many of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The discussion will ask to the discussion to share their comments to the presenters. So if you so Dario, just 1 minute. Yes. We are already late.
Thank you for your comments. They are all very useful, and we will take a look at your suggestions and new estimations with your suggestions. So probably one thing I should speak about is our definition of the treatment, because Marie, you're right that maybe it deserves more. So the specific definition of our treatment is we have municipalities which have strictly more than 0 attacks by FARC historically. So, and you are right, maybe FARC affects other municipalities, but the issue is that being attacked by the FARC and being violently attacked is what drives our if you wanted, our main rationalization of how FARC affected people, affected municipalities, and basically when you see the history of the country, you see that what FARC was doing was really intimidating municipalities through violence. So you are right. There may be other ways in which the FARC, this violence affected municipalities, but this was really what we know already in the country, that it was like the main mechanism they had for intimidating and affecting, and the main way they were affecting individuals and communities. So, but we can try to look at some more things. So probably your seemingly unrelated equation suggestion is also useful. We may take a look at this, because what I feel when I see these results is that we may not be seeing many of all the reallocations, because we have, I mean, a big shock in somewhere. So, for example, labor market participation for women, but then most of the time that goes to labor, the other dimensions dilutes in many of the other dimensions, and then we are not able to statistically see the things that are happening. Okay, so maybe some other type of specifications. One could be similarly related equations, but some other things would be like trying to aggregate different uses of time, productive and unproductive time, or leisure and time spent at house overall, because time against time spent away from the house overall may allow us to see some other things which are, I feel that they are behind of your question of why are you not seeing other type of effects at the same time you see, for example, more care on individuals or on others, or sometimes, and that's also part of what I think I feel that's also part of what you see with this change in sleep. So why, if people are sleeping less, what then are they doing besides in that additional time they have, if you don't see it in other places?
Okay, yeah,
and just to answer, so just to be clear, yes, we can't show parallel trends, and that's why we are taking care on doing other things, and we understand that propensity score matching is not a substitute for that, but then it's also a way to try to see how robust our results, and whether we other type of methodologies allow us to see how robust these effects are with other types of ways of analyzing that data.
Okay, thank you, Dario. Thank you, everybody. Let's just present the next seminar in 24th of March. We will have Carlos Madera and Facundo Luna, who will present 2 papers. The first is Impact of Information Laws on Consumer Credit Access, Evidence from Chile, and Climate Shocks, Trade Credit, and Firm Resilience in Chile. And it's in 25th of March. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, participants. Thank you, Marina and Dario, for your nice presentations. Thank you, Ali, Zahra, for your discussions and the time you take to read the papers. And see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, see you.